The oil lamp flickered, casting its trembling light on Amara Johnson, a 20-year-old black girl, daughter of a poor innkeeper in Dust Creek, forced to wed Jacob Carter, heir to the richest ranch in 3 counties. Yet tonight, in the arms of Ethan Walker, a wandering veteran, marked by scars of war, she dared, for the first time, to breathe as herself. Their kiss trembled yet burned. His calloused hand pressed firm over her racing heart. Moonlight slipped through the gaps in the wooden walls. The coarse sheets bore witness, as a bound girl and a homeless man found each other. But was this true love, or only a fragile flame before the storm of prejudice and power waiting outside? The sun hung heavy over the harsh western sky. Its late light stretched thin like ribbons of fire, painting the prairie in scorched bronze and rose-dusted haze. In 1875, the border town of Dust Creek was little more than a cluster of weathered cabins, clinging stubbornly to survival. The wind carried the scent of burnt sand and the groan of an old signboard, a reminder that life here endured only by grit and chance. Inside the lone inn of the town, Amara Johnson stood by the window, her work-roughened hands smoothing a curtain worn thin by years of use. She was 20, her face darkened by the sun, yet her deep brown eyes held more dreams than stars could fill the night sky. Her coiled hair was tied beneath a faded kerchief, loose strands damp with sweat clinging to her brow. The hands that once longed to hold a pen now belonged to wooden spoons and endless stacks of dishes. Her parents, innkeepers, hardened by disappointment, repeated the same refrain: Amara must marry soon. And Jacob Carter, the son of the richest rancher across 3 counties, was the right choice. A 4-room house, a fine horse, a name that could guard her family's reputation. They called it safety. To Amara, it was a gilded cage. Amara, fetch water from the creek. We'll have travelers tonight. Her mother's voice carried from the kitchen, hoarse and tired from years of waiting for a fortune that never came. Amara laid aside the cloth, shouldered the wooden yoke, and set out with 2 empty tin buckets. Dust rose beneath her feet as she passed the town's main road. Old men sat outside the general store, staring at the sky as if they might divine tomorrow from the color of the clouds. She lowered her gaze in greeting, slipped past the crude leer of Tom from the saloon, and turned toward the edge of town. The trail to the creek was worn by her own steps, weaving between sagebrush and cactus. The sharp smell of wild grass mingled with heat so thick each breath felt like swallowing stone. Though familiar, the path unsettled her today. Perhaps it was the golden slant of light through the cottonwoods, or the strange hush as if even the birds held their breath. She knelt at the flat rock, lowering her bucket into the cool, clear stream. This little creek fed the whole town, as precious as gold in a land of drought. Reaching for the second bucket, she heard a sound, the soft breath of a horse behind the thicket. Amara froze. Travelers usually stuck to the main road, not this narrow trail. A chill ran her spine. No, the steps were too loud for their silence. Her hand brushed the small knife at her belt. A gift from her father for protection, though she'd used it more on rope than defense. Through the willows, she saw a gaunt, dust-worn horse, drinking deeply. Beside it knelt a man, hat cast aside, splashing water over his face. The dying sun struck his lean figure in streaks of gold and red. His shirt was faded gray, his trousers caked in road dust, boots cracked, his leather coat worn thin. Yet unlike the usual drifters, there was a discipline in his movements, habits of a soldier. He lifted his head. Water ran along his jaw, dripping to his collar. His eyes met hers. Time stalled. The stream hushed. The wind stilled. Only that gaze remained gray as winter skies, burdened with fatigue and sorrow unnamed. It caught her breath, squeezing her chest with both fear and a strange, unspoken recognition. She should have shouted, should have fled, should have demanded his purpose. A lone black woman outside town ought never stand still before a stranger. Yet his eyes held her fast. I mean no harm. His voice rumbled low, rough as wind over sand. Only watering my horse. Amara gripped her knife, her hand trembling. This is townland. The main road is behind you. Her voice faltered softer than she intended. He rose slowly, careful not to startle, as though soothing a skittish colt. I know. I just wanted to avoid a crowd. Not every place welcomes strangers. Strangers usually take the main road, she said, eyes flicking to the revolver at his hip. His mouth tugged faintly, not quite a smile. Strangers usually have nothing to hide. I do. The words should have frightened her. Instead, her pulse quickened. The way he stood, the restraint in his calloused hands, the gaze that carried no threat, it was unlike any man she had known. Are you running from the law? The question slipped out before she could stop it. This time he truly smiled, brief but brighter than sunset. No, miss. The law and I are at peace. I'm only running from other things. Somehow, she understood, though she could not say why. Perhaps because she, too, was running. From Jacob, from a future drawn straight as a surveyor's line. The willows whispered as the wind returned. From afar, her mother's voice called faintly. Amara grabbed her buckets, water sloshing onto her skirt. I must go. He stepped forward, then stopped short, unwilling to press her fear. Forgive me. I never meant to startle you. You didn't. The truth surprised her own lips. But you should leave. Folks in town don't trust strangers. Least of all ones who avoid the road. He nodded, gray eyes softening with something like understanding. I'll be gone before the moon rises. Amara lifted the yoke onto her shoulders, hurrying down the path. Yet after a few steps, she looked back. He still stood there, motionless beneath the burning sky, his gaze following her, not like a hunter, but like a lost soul who had glimpsed something familiar. Her heart pounded, not just from the weight of the water. She knew this meeting had cracked open the straight path of her life. In the distance, Dust Creek clattered on with hammer blows, hoarse cries, and old men's laughter. But for Amara, the world had shifted, all because of one look beside the creek. By late afternoon, when the sun had slipped behind the far ridge, Dust Creek lay in a wash of pale, brittle light. A dry wind carried the taste of sand, sliding through the warped planks of the Johnson Inn, until the door hinges groaned like old bones. Behind the counter, Amara wiped the tabletops with a worn cloth, her ear tuned to the distant rhythm of hooves on the main road. The door swung open, and with the gust of dust came the lean figure she had met by the creek. He paused at the threshold, removed his hat, and inclined his head, a small gesture that startled her more than it should have. Most strangers barged into Dust Creek with noise and demand, tossing their bags down and calling for cheap whiskey. This man carried quiet with him, each movement touched by a kind of respect. A room if you have one. His voice was low, gravel-edged, steady. Amara nodded, forcing calm though her pulse misstepped. There's one left upstairs. How long will you be staying? Not sure. A few nights, maybe longer. He set his frayed bag on the floor, gray eyes measuring, as though weighing her reaction. Her hand trembled slightly as she opened the old ledger. Your name? Ethan Walker. She wrote it down carefully, though she already knew the sound of it in her head. Ethan stood still, hands loose at his sides, though she noticed the calluses, the sun-darkened skin hands of a man shaped by work, not privilege. When she slid the key across, his hand rose at the same time. Their fingers brushed, only for a moment, yet the touch ran through her, like a spark along dry timber. She looked up and found his gaze waiting cool, gray, unreadable, and yet impossibly deep. They lingered too long until her mother's cough rattled from the kitchen, breaking the spell. Heat flooded Amara's face as she drew back. Staircase on the left, Last room down the hall. Her voice caught, thinner than she meant. Thank you. Ethan gave a short nod and lifted his bag. When his shape disappeared up the stairs, she found herself clutching the spare key like it might still carry his warmth. The respite was brief. The door banged open again, this time filled by Jacob Carter. He entered with swagger polished to shine, boots striking hard against the wooden floor. His black coat was dusted from the ride, but the gold ring on his finger gleamed, as if to remind the room who he was. Amara. His drawl stretched her name as he strode to the counter. Your folks around? She swallowed. In the kitchen. What do you need? He leaned his elbow across the counter, leaning closer, the sting of whiskey heavy on his breath. Only one answer. When are you going to say yes to me? It was the same question, over and over, and each time it pressed the air from her chest. She stepped back, stiffening her voice. You should speak with my parents. I already have. They agreed. All that's left is you. His smile was sharp, his pale eyes glinting not with affection, but possession. Before Amara could answer, footsteps sounded on the stairs. Ethan appeared, hat in hand, perhaps intending to step out. He stopped cold at the sight, Amara tense, Jacob leaning too close. For a heartbeat, silence thickened, broken only by the creak of floorboards. Ethan's eyes flicked to Jacob's hand, resting too near her shoulder. No word was spoken, but the air bristled. Amara caught Ethan's glance. In those gray eyes flashed a question unspoken. Are you all right? Jacob noticed, turned, and smirked. Well now. A stranger. Don't recall inviting you to Dust Creek. Ethan's face did not shift. He touched the brim of his hat with 2 fingers. Just passing through. Renting a room. Then know your place. Jacob's grip tightened on Amara's shoulder, pressing claim. This is my land. And this girl. His voice dropped, but loud enough for Ethan to hear. She'll soon belong to me. Blood rushed to Amara's cheeks, hot with shame and fury. She wanted to shake off his hand, but with Ethan standing there, she froze, heart pounding. Ethan said nothing, but the calm, stone-hard way he looked at Jacob unsettled the rancher more than raised voices ever could. From the kitchen came a sharp bang, and her father's voice calling. Jacob released her, straightened his coat, and sent Ethan a glance lined with scorn. Don't stay long, drifter. Men like you never last in Dust Creek. He strode toward the kitchen, leaving behind the scent of whiskey and the echo of threat. Amara stood rooted, her fingers brushing the shoulder he had claimed as if to erase it. Ethan inclined his head slightly, concern flickering, but he did not step closer. She turned away quickly, shuffling papers, anything to hide the storm inside her chest. My apologies. His voice broke the hush, quiet and steady. I didn't mean to intrude. She drew a breath and faced him. You didn't. Then, softer, words nearly swallowed in the lamplight. Thank you for being there. Ethan's nod was slight, his eyes holding hers a moment longer before he stepped away, slipping into the night with the same silence he had brought in. When the door closed, Amara pressed her palm to her chest, feeling her heartbeat scatter wild and uneven. In the dim yellow glow of the inn, she knew one truth. Some invisible cord had fastened itself between her and the stranger named Ethan Walker. Night settled over Dust Creek. The Johnson Inn still lit with oil lamps, their yellow glow pressed against the stiff wooden walls. Supper had ended, most travelers gone to their rooms, and only a few weary men lingered over bowls of thin soup. In the kitchen, Amara's parents sat opposite each other, faces drawn in the lamplight. Her father drummed his fingers on the table, voice low but unyielding. Amara, you must listen. Jacob Carter is the only chance this family has for a place in Dust Creek. He's rich, he's got land, more cattle than the whole town combined. If he wants you, you ought to count it as a blessing. Amara gripped her skirt, silent. She had heard these words 100 times, yet each repetition cut fresh as a blade. Her mother, Ruth, usually quiet, spoke now, weariness tugging at her tone. Love, that's a luxury. What matters is security. Think ahead, child. When we are old, will this inn survive? Jacob can give you a steady home, children who will be safe. That is what a woman needs. Amara lifted her eyes, meeting her mother's. There was more than calculation there was fear. Fear of hunger, of being cast adrift in a land that devoured the weak. But that fear pressed its weight onto Amara's shoulders, like a yoke she could not shrug off. I do not love him. Her voice was small, trembling. I cannot. Her father exhaled hard, shaking his head. Love? You dream too much. Out here, love won't put bread on your table or keep wolves from your door. Jacob will protect you. That is the truth. Amara said nothing more. Yet in her mind, she saw gray eyes, Ethan Walker's steady gaze, clearer than the flame flickering in front of her. That look had not promised wealth or land. It had given her something rarer, the sense of being truly seen, something Jacob or anyone else in town had never given her. Morning brought a thin drizzle, the inn's porch slick with last night's rain. Amara carried a tray of coffee to the front room, where Ethan sat alone at a table near the window. His hat lay beside him, broad shoulders relaxed, as if he were listening to the whistle of wind outside rather than waiting for anything at all. She stepped toward him, but the old floor betrayed her. A damp patch sent her foot sliding, the tray tilting. With a sharp clatter, cups struck, and hot coffee splashed across Ethan's sleeve and chest. Oh heavens! Amara gasped, dropping the tray onto the table, fumbling for a cloth. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean I wasn't careful. Ethan flinched, more from heat than anger, but his voice remained calm. He tugged his shirt away from his skin, glancing at the dark stain spreading. No harm done. Accidents happen. Her hands shook as she dabbed at the mess, but her nerves betrayed her. Each stroke only made it worse. Her fingers brushed against his chest, and beneath the damp cloth she felt the solid warmth of muscle. Her breath caught. Flustered, she stammered, You should take off your shirt. I can wash it. There's warm water in the back." He hesitated, then slowly began unbuttoning. The motion was unhurried, almost careful, as if mindful of her unease. The worn fabric slid from his shoulders, revealing a frame lean and strong, built not from vanity, but survival. Her eyes froze on the scar that ran across his chest, not large, but jagged, like a memory carved into flesh. Her throat tightened, heat rising in her face. She lowered her gaze at once. "Give me the shirt," she muttered quickly, her words tumbling. "I'll see to it right away." He handed it over, their fingers brushing again. Just a fleeting touch, but it made her heartbeat stumble. His eyes held hers, steady, not prying, not mocking, simply knowing. Clutching the damp shirt to her chest, Amara turned and fled toward the kitchen. Behind her, Ethan sat bare-chested in the pale light spilling through the window. He let out a slow breath, eyes still fixed on the space where she had stood moments ago. In the kitchen, Amara pressed the fabric tight against her, her cheeks burning. In her ears, her parents' voices echoed the same words about stability, protection, wealth, yet over them beat the relentless thrum of her heart, stirred by gray eyes and the warmth of a hand that had never sought to claim, only to meet hers. Something was growing within her, something her parents would call foolishness, a dream. But to her, it was the first spark of something she dared not yet name. Night drew its veil over Dust Creek, slow and heavy as black velvet. The full moon rose above the weathered rooftops, spilling its silver wash over the silent main street. The day's dust had settled, and the town seemed to hold its breath, leaving only the chorus of crickets to stitch sound into the darkness. Amara stepped onto the porch of the inn, her bare feet whispering against the worn planks. In her arms lay Ethan's shirt washed clean. dried beneath the afternoon sun, and faintly scented with soap. She had folded it carefully, and now she held it close, slowing her steps when she saw him already there. Ethan sat on the porch steps, his tall frame steady against the post, a hand-rolled cigarette burning between his fingers. The ember flared red, casting brief light across his face, before fading into the night air. Smoke curled upward, mingling with the moonlight until he seemed half real, half ghost, a figure carved from solitude. Amara hesitated, then spoke softly. "I brought your shirt." He lifted his head. In the pale glow, his gray eyes seemed deeper still. He ground the cigarette against the post and rose to meet her. When she handed him the shirt, his fingers brushed hers again. Accidental, fleeting, but the spark of it traveled straight through her. "Thank you," Ethan said, his voice rough, quiet. Amara pressed her lips together, then asked, "Does the burn still hurt?" He shook his head. "No, I've carried worse." She studied him, then ventured, "You were a soldier, weren't you?" A pause stretched between them before he nodded. "Yes. The war took more than land or time. It took friends, home, and pieces of who I was." Amara sank onto the steps, drawing her knees close. After a moment, Ethan lowered himself beside her, leaving space, but not too much. Moonlight draped their shoulders. The hush of night gathered them in. "You must be lonely," she murmured. His mouth curved faintly, not joy, but truth. "You're the first to say that. Most towns I pass through, folks see a stranger, nothing more. They don't want my stories. They don't even want to look long." Amara turned, her gaze steady, warm in the moonlight. "I want to hear." Silence lingered, and then the wind shifted. A lock of her hair, loosened from her scarf, drifted across his hand. Ethan's fingers moved slowly, deliberately, tucking it back behind her ear. Amara's pulse hammered. Heat climbed her cheeks, but she did not move away. Their eyes locked long, unbroken, as though the rest of the world had vanished, leaving only two souls sitting under the moon. His voice was low when he spoke again. "This is the first time a woman has ever listened to me." Her chest tightened. The words carried no charm, no promise. They were stripped bare, but that honesty pierced her deeper than any vow. She smiled faintly, a fragile curve. "Perhaps you've simply been telling the wrong women." Ethan said nothing, only held her gaze, and in it, she felt herself both seen and held. There was no claim in him, no force, only a quiet recognition of pain met by pain. A breeze stirred, carrying the dry scent of sage and earth. Amara folded her arms around herself and shivered lightly. Ethan shifted, as if to offer his coat, then stilled, caught between distance and closeness. The span between them remained, yet the invisible thread tightened, binding more with every moment. They stayed there beneath the moon, words falling away. The silence was not empty. It brimmed with what neither dared say aloud. Sorrow, understanding, and the faintest beginnings of something more. At last, Amara rose, clutching the shirt still warm from his hand. She stepped toward the door, but paused when his voice called her name. "Amara." She turned, hand resting on the frame. "Good night," Ethan said, simple as a stone dropped in still water. She smiled, soft and sure. "Good night, Ethan." The door closed behind her, but in her chest another door had opened wide. That noon, the sky above Dust Creek burned like an open furnace. Heat shimmered off the dry earth, warping the air like curtains of flame. Jacob Carter rode to the Johnson Inn, carrying a picnic basket far too fine for a frontier town embroidered linen, a glass bottle of red wine, and rare foods Dust Creek could barely name. "Mr. Johnson's face lit at once. Go with Jacob, daughter. He's kind enough to take you out for fresh air. The sooner you learn to be at ease with him, the smoother things will be." Amara wanted to refuse, but her father's stern look and her mother's quiet nod closed her throat. In silence, She climbed into Jacob's wagon. She knew well. This was no picnic. It was a snare. They stopped by the creek meadow, the very place that had once offered Amara peace, now twisted into a stage for Jacob's display. He spread the cloth, poured the wine, set out the food. Amara sat still, hands gripping her skirt to hide the trembling beneath. Amara. Jacob lifted his glass, his voice dripping with false charm. You're fortunate. No man in these counties could give you what I can. Land, cattle, a name, safety. All of it could be yours. All you need is one word. Amara drew a deep breath, meeting his eyes. I do not love you, Jacob, and I never will. The smile on his lips snapped away, replaced by a cold gleam. You think love feeds you? Your parents are scraping by on a failing inn. They need me, and so do you. Her hands clenched. Anger rose through the fear. No, I don't need you, and my parents don't need your pity. Jacob hurled the glass to the ground, shards scattering. He seized Amara's arm and yanked her up. Don't play noble. You're a black woman in a white town, Amara. You have no choice but me. You'll marry me or watch your family lose everything. Fear surged, but fire burned with it. She struggled, striking his chest with her free hand. Let me go. His grip tightened, breath sour with wine. You'll be mine, sooner or later. And then another voice, firm, cutting through the air. Let her go. Jacob spun, startled. From the shade of the cottonwoods, Ethan Walker stepped out, tall and steady. His shadow stretched across the grass, his gray eyes sharp as steel. What the hell are you doing here? Jacob snarled. Ethan didn't answer at once. He took a measured step closer, calm as a man long used to danger. I said, let her go. Jacob barked a laugh, dripping contempt. You think you can meddle in this, drifter? Ethan's gaze fell on the hand clutching Amara's arm. His voice stayed even, hard as hammered iron. I'm the only one here who doesn't want her hurt. For a moment, Jacob faltered. Then, in defiance, he clamped tighter, as if to prove control. She's my betrothed. No. Ethan advanced another step, eyes flashing. She belongs to no one. Amara felt the air crackle between them, two forces straining against each other. She shook, but for the first time she saw someone stand between her and Jacob. Warmth swelled in her chest, pushing back the fear. Jacob's teeth clenched. He shoved her aside, turning his rage on Ethan. You want to fight me? You'll regret it. Ethan didn't move, save to lift one arm behind him, steadying Amara with a hand on her shoulder. The touch was firm, grounding. His voice dropped, low enough for her alone. You're not alone. Tears stung Amara's eyes. For years she had lived under orders, in shadows, bound by others' choices. For the first time, someone told her she was not by herself. Jacob lunged a step forward, but Amara's voice rang out, strong and sure. I will never be your wife, Jacob. Never. Her defiance cracked his temper wide open. Fury twisted his face, but Ethan had already moved, his tall frame blocking her from Jacob's reach. His eyes burned with a cold defiance that needed no words. Jacob saw it, and beneath his rage came hesitation. He spat his threat through clenched teeth. This isn't over. He stormed away, leaving the basket, the shattered glass, and the heavy air behind. Amara sagged, knees weak, but Ethan's hand steadied her. He bent slightly, his eyes no longer hard, only gentle. Are you all right? She nodded, though tears slid freely down her cheeks. She wanted to thank him, but her voice broke. The sun dipped low, burning red against the horizon. Amid the wreckage of wine and broken crystal, Amara knew something had shifted forever. The oil lamp in the Johnson Inn cast its weary glow across gray wooden walls, stretching Mr. Johnson's shadow until it loomed heavy as judgment itself. He stood square at the bottom of the stairs, face flushed with liquor and anger. That man will not spend another night under this roof, he thundered, fist pounding the counter until the glass rattled. A drifter, no kin, no coin, nothing but trouble for this house. Mrs. Ruth said nothing, but the tight set of her lips spoke her agreement. She laid a key on the counter, her voice sharp as a blade. Tomorrow he leaves. We still have a name to keep, Amara. A daughter cannot let herself be distracted by some outsider. Amara froze halfway up the stairs, her heart battering against her ribs. Each word from her parents carved into her like steel. She longed to cry out, to defend Ethan, but fear sealed her tongue. Below, Ethan quietly gathered his things. He did not argue. He did not beg, only nodded once. Tall frame, steady yet solitary, as a lone tree against the night wind. Before stepping through the door, his eyes found Amara's. The look lingered only a heartbeat, but it carried more than words could bear. There was no blame in it, only acceptance, and a sorrow so deep it nearly drove her to tears. The door closed. Hooves echoed on the dirt road outside. Then silence. That night, Amara lay awake, staring at the timbered ceiling. The tick of the clock, loud as chains binding her in place. She heard again Ethan's whisper from that day by the stream. "You're not alone." Stronger than every command her parents had ever spoken. Those words beat against her ribs. She could not bear it. Rising from her bed, she wrapped a thin shawl about her shoulders and slipped from her room. The house slept, save for her father's snore rumbling below. Each step creaked beneath her weight, but she did not stop. At the back door, she pressed it open and let the night air rush over her, sharp with dry earth and sage. Ethan had not gone far. She found him at the edge of town, in an abandoned shack by the creek, where moonlight filtered through sparse cottonwoods. His horse dozed nearby, reins tied to a splintered post. Breathless, she stood at the door, hand pressed to her chest to still its wild beating. Pushing the boards aside, she stepped in. Ethan looked up from a small lamp on the floor, surprise flashing before he rose quickly to his feet. "Amara, what are you doing here? At this hour?" She closed the door behind her, the sound muffled by the night. His face was worn, shadowed with worry, but his eyes blazed when they met hers. "I cannot let you go," she burst out, voice shaking. "I cannot lie in that house pretending none of this matters. I choose you, Ethan, no matter what comes." He stood frozen, caught between hope and disbelief. At last he stepped forward, halting just a breath away. "Do you know what you're saying? I'm a wanderer with nothing but these hands. My past is not clean, my future uncertain. I have nothing to give you." Amara lifted her chin, tears bright in her dark eyes, yet steady with resolve. "Then I will take your hands. Don't you see? My whole life has been chosen for me, pressed into the mold of safety. I don't want safe. I want living, and I want it with you." Something broke inside him then. His rough hand lifted, trembling as it traced her cheek. She closed her eyes, leaning into his palm like a parched soul to water. "I tried to stay clear," his voice rasped. "But don't." She opened her eyes, gaze unwavering. "Don't turn away. I choose you." Silence thickened. Then he bent to her. His breath mingled with hers, warm with smoke and dust. His lips touched her brow, her cheek, before hovering near her trembling mouth. The first kiss was a prayer, soft, hesitant, fragile, but she answered, arms rising to his neck, shy and trembling but sure. A low sound escaped him, and he pulled her into his embrace, holding her as though she were the only thing left worth saving. Clothing rustled, tangled between them. Amara drew back, flushed, whispering, I don't know what to do." Ethan's smile broke, tender enough to melt her fear. "We're not in a hurry, only if you're certain." Her hand pressed over the scar on his chest, feeling the hammering beneath. "I am." They sank onto a rough blanket spread across the floorboards. Moonlight slanted through the gaps in the wall, striping their bodies in silver. Ethan shed his coat, his shirt, each movement steady, unhurried. His chest was marked by scars, not trophies of strength, but reminders of survival. Amara brushed the fabric aside, her fingers trembling as they met his skin. He caught her hand, pressing it to his heart. "Do you feel it? I've never shaken like this in all my life." Tears shimmered as she smiled, and when their lips met again, it was no longer restraint, but fire. The kiss deepened, fierce, endless, as though each had waited a lifetime. His hands traced her back, pulling her closer until she melted into his breath and warmth. Amara clung to him, her fingers threading his hair, gripping his shoulders, desperate to hold fast to the reality of him. Their gasps tangled, ragged, urgent, carrying them past fear into need. They gave themselves to each other not only in kisses, but in the surrender of every wall they had carried. The moon carved its trembling light across their joined bodies, etching into the night a promise neither law nor family could erase. That night, the world beyond the shack vanished. There was only the rhythm of hearts finding one another at last. Only the breath of two souls who had been lost too long. Dawn came slow to Dust Creek, as though the heavens themselves tried to grant them a little more time. The first light filtered through the narrow slats of the abandoned shack, spilling across two figures still bound together after the night that had changed everything. Amara stirred first, her gaze resting on Ethan's bare chest, the steady rise and fall of his breath. Her fingertips brushed the faint scar at his shoulder, harsh, yet tender in its permanence. And in her heart the thought rose, clear as prayer. This is where I belong. But beyond these walls, the town still waited, filled with sharp eyes and cruel whispers. Jacob, proud and ruthless, would never allow her to slip from his grip, nor would her parents condone a marriage without wealth or name. The chains of Dust Creek rattled closer every hour. Only one path remained: escape. That afternoon, back in her room at the inn, Amara sat before a rough-hewn table, a blank sheet of paper spread before her. The pen trembled in her hand as she wrote, "Dearest father and mother, when you read this, I will already be gone. I know my choice will wound you, bring anger, perhaps shame, but I cannot live a life built from another's will. I do not choose safety, nor wealth. I choose love. I choose the man who sees me as I am. Forgive me. If not today, then someday. I carry your lessons with me, but I must walk where my heart leads. Your daughter, Amara." Tears fell, blotting the ink. She folded the letter and slipped it beneath her mother's silver comb, the same one that had smoothed her curls since childhood. It felt like laying down a farewell. When night crept back over Dust Creek, Amara moved quietly through the sleeping inn. Her father's snores echoed faint from below. Every creak of the stairs threatened to betray her. But she pressed on, shawl pulled tight. At the back door, she drew a breath, pushed it open, and let the night wind rush in, sharp with sage and dust. The path to the stables stretched before her, shadowed and silent. Her heart hammered with each step, with each bark of a dog or sigh of wind over tin. Yet the thought of Ethan waiting ahead steadied her legs. The stables lay dim, save for the flicker of a lantern. A horse whickered low, and in its light stood Ethan, fastening the last strap of a saddle. At the sound of her steps, he lifted his head. Their eyes met, and the distance between them dissolved. "You came," Ethan said, his voice a low blend of relief and resolve. Amara nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I left a letter. By morning, they'll know." He crossed the space and took her hands, rough palms closing around her trembling fingers. "Once we ride out, there's no turning back. Are you certain, Amara?" She looked into him, the lamplight catching the fire in her dark eyes. "I chose last night. Tonight, I act." A burden seemed to ease from his shoulders. He touched her cheek, thumb tracing the dampness of sweat and tears. "Then I swear, wherever the road leads, I'll keep you safe." Words failed her. so she wrapped her arms around him, pressing close. Their kiss came fast, urgent, the taste of farewell and promise mingled on their lips. His grip tightened at her back, hers at his shirt, as if both feared the other might vanish. A hoof struck against the stall, jolting them back. Ethan drew away, eyes still burning. "We have to leave before Jacob or your father suspects." Amara nodded. He lifted her into the saddle, then swung up behind, his arms closing firm around her. In that circle, she felt the strength, the shield, the love she had chosen above all else. "Ready?" he murmured near her ear. Her hand rested over his where it held the reins, her smile breaking through the tears. "I was ready the moment I saw you by the creek." Ethan urged the horse forward. Hooves thundered down the dirt road, carrying them beyond the edge of Bitter Creek, beyond family and duty. The night spread wide before them, vast and uncertain, yet alive with freedom. Amara clung to the truth burning in her chest. Whatever awaited, she had chosen, and she would never regret it. The desert wind slashed at their faces like blades, stinging with grit as Ethan urged the horse onward. Amara clung to him, the rhythm of hooves pounding beneath them while Bitter Creek shrank behind. But distance did not mean safety. Jacob Carter would not yield. By morning, he had ridden into a neighboring town and laid gold across a scarred table. "Find them. Bring her back. As for him, dead or alive, I don't care." The men he hired bore eyes as cold as iron, bounty hunters who measured loyalty in coin alone. For 2 days, Amara and Ethan pushed through barren country. The sun seared their skin, water ran low, and even their horse faltered beneath the weight of heat. Amara's throat burned with thirst, yet she uttered no complaint. She leaned into Ethan's back, steadying herself with the beat of his heart. At night, they huddled beneath mesquite branches, shadows cast by the flicker of a small fire. Ethan divided the last of their water, pressing the tin cup into her hands despite her protest. "I've lived on less," he rasped. "You need it more." His gray eyes never left the horizon, as though he expected danger to walk out of the darkness at any moment. By the third dawn, as they climbed into a ridge of jagged stone, the sound of pursuit broke the morning silence. Hooves thundered, dust plumed. Their hunters had caught up. "Hold tight," Ethan called, driving the horse harder. Gunfire cracked. Bullets tore through the air, one close enough to stir Amara's hair. She bent low, arms tight around him, while Ethan drew his revolver and fired back with measured precision. One rider tumbled from the saddle, but 4 pressed on. The ridge ended in a precipice. Before them yawned a canyon, wind screaming through its depths. Ethan pulled hard, halting at the brink. He swung down, helping Amara to cover behind a boulder. Breath came ragged, his eyes scanning the advancing shadows. "We're cornered," Amara whispered, voice shaking. Ethan shook his head once, cold steel in his tone. "No, it's just another fight." The exchange erupted. Gunfire rattled across stone. Ethan's aim was steady, 2 more fell, rolling into the dust. But a shot caught him across the shoulder, ripping through cloth and flesh. He dropped back, crimson spreading down his arm. "Ethan!" Amara cried, pressing her hands against the wound. His jaw tightened, but he forced a pained smile. "Don't let them take you." Through the haze of dust, Jacob appeared at the head of the riders. His sneer twisted as he raised his weapon. "It's over, Amara. You know where you belong." Something snapped within her. Fear, her old companion, shattered like glass. Rising from Ethan's side, blood staining her dress and hands, she faced Jacob with fire blazing in her eyes. "No, Jacob." Her voice rang across the canyon. "I don't belong to you. I never did. I choose him, and I'll defend him with my life if I must." Jacob reined his horse, startled by the defiance of the woman who had once bowed to silence. Amara seized Ethan's fallen revolver. Her grip trembled, yet her aim held straight on him. Back away, she shouted. The bounty hunters glanced at one another, uncertainty breaking their resolve. Her stare burned with something fiercer than fear conviction. Jacob snarled, spurring his horse forward. Amara fired. The bullet struck the ground at his mount's hooves, and the beast reared high, nearly unseating him. I said back away, she cried, voice hard as steel. For a breath, time froze. The canyon, the dust, the circling vultures overhead. A single woman stood against wealth, power, and armed men, and the balance shifted. Jacob's rage boiled, but calculation cooled it. He yanked his reins, spitting his command. Fall back! Reluctantly, his riders turned. Their hoofbeats faded into distance, leaving only silence and the reek of gunpowder. Amara dropped to her knees beside Ethan, his skin paled, sweat streaking his brow. She cradled him, tears falling hot onto his face. Stay with me, Ethan. Don't leave me. I've stood for you once, and I'll stand again, but I can't do it alone. His lips curved faintly, voice no more than a rasp. I told you. You're not alone. And now, neither am I. She held him tighter, lifting her gaze to the searing sky. In that barren canyon, where death had brushed close, Amara discovered not only her courage but her power, the strength to choose, to protect, and to never again be silent. The sun had begun its slow descent when Amara guided Ethan down into a narrow valley west of the ridge. A clear stream wound its way between moss-covered stones, its waters glinting like silver threads under the fading light. Beside it rose a great cottonwood, its branches stretching wide, sheltering them beneath a canopy of trembling leaves. Their weary horse lowered its head to drink, while Amara eased Ethan to the ground against the tree's sturdy trunk. Blood still seeped through the torn fabric at his shoulder, his breaths uneven, but his gray eyes stayed fixed on her, as if she were the anchor, holding him steady in the storm. Sit still. I'll tend you, she said, her voice steadier than her hands. She soaked a cloth in the cool stream and pressed it gently to his wound. Ethan clenched his jaw, fingers digging into a stone, but not a sound escaped him. Amara's hands trembled, yet she worked with quiet resolve, as though every touch carried a prayer. When his gaze met hers, there was no complaint in his eyes, only a silent trust that made her chest ache. You shouldn't be here, Ethan murmured through ragged breath. I bring you nothing but danger. She silenced him with a finger laid to his lips. If not for you, I'd already belong to Jacob. I'd rather face peril than live in chains. Wordlessly, Ethan let her bind the wound with strips torn from her own dress. The brush of her fingers across his skin burned with more than pain. It carried the weight of a bond being sealed. That night, they built a fire by the stream. Amara fed him strips of dried meat, lifting the cup of water to his lips whenever he coughed. For a man hardened by war, by years of carrying his burdens alone, her care unsettled him more deeply than the threat of bullets. Amara, Ethan spoke at last, his voice low as the fire sank to embers. She looked up, her dark eyes gleaming in the glow. I have nothing to give you but myself. No land, no riches, no certainty. Only a man scarred and haunted by where he's been. She moved to kneel before him, laying her hand over his chest where his heart hammered strong and sure. That is enough. You are enough. His gray eyes widened, then closed as he leaned his brow against her palm. For the first time in years, Ethan let himself believe he was worthy of being loved. Later, they lay close beside the dying fire. Amara's head rested on his uninjured arm, listening to the rhythm of his heartbeat. The wind carried the scent of damp earth and wild grass, wrapping them in a peace they had never known. My parents will hate me forever, she whispered. Ethan drew her nearer. Maybe, maybe not. But even if they never forgive, we'll make a family of our own. Her laugh broke through tears. A family here, by this cottonwood? Yes, he answered, eyes shining with a quiet fire. and no one will take it from us. Morning light filtered through the leaves, dappled gold across the ground. Amara rinsed the blood-stained cloths in the stream, her reflection rippling back at her, a woman who had chosen her path. Ethan leaned against the tree, watching her with a tenderness that startled him. He saw in her a strength unlike any he had known, born not of weapons or battlefields, but of love that endured. Amara, he called softly. She turned, smiling, the sun catching on her dark curls. What is it? I need nothing more than you, he said simply. She came to him then, letting his rough hand close over hers. And in that secret valley, the world outside fell away. No past, no Jacob, no bitter creek, only two souls, bound by a love strong enough to face whatever waited beyond the ridge. The sun scorched the endless desert, every grain of sand stinging like needles against their skin. Amara was on the brink of collapse, her legs trembling, each step dragging across the burning ground. Ethan, his left shoulder still bound and bleeding through the bandage, gripped her hand firmly, guiding her one step at a time. Hold on, Amara, he whispered, his voice hoarse. Just a little farther. She tried to nod, but her vision blurred, and her breath came ragged. Without his arm steadying her, she would have crumpled long before. Ethan saw the struggle on her face, his heart twisting. With a grimace of pain, he tightened his jaw and swept her up in his good arm, ignoring the sharp fire that tore through his wound. Amara rested her head against his chest, her voice faint. You don't have to push yourself so hard. Ethan let out a breathless laugh, sweat pouring like rain. I carried men off battlefields worse than this. You're light as the wind. By the time night closed in, they spotted a flicker of firelight on a hillside. Ethan set Amara down gently and drew his gun, every sense on guard. But as he approached, a rough, familiar voice cut through the dark. Walker, that you? Ethan, Walker. Ethan froze. Out of the firelight stepped a broad-shouldered man with a heavy beard, his worn leather jacket hanging loose, his eyes shining with sudden joy. Lord above, it is you, the man bellowed, spreading his arms wide. Ethan's tense frame eased. He lowered his gun, a rare smile flickering across his face. Jonah Reed, I never thought I'd see you here. Jonah Reed, once his comrade in the war, now a wanderer living by his rifle, looked older, more weathered, but his gaze was still honest. When his eyes fell on Amara, pale and exhausted behind Ethan, he didn't waste time with questions. He moved forward at once, supporting her with a gentleness that belied his rough hands, and guided them to a small adobe dwelling hidden in the canyon wall. Inside the sturdy shelter, firelight pushed back the night's chill. Amara lay on a straw mattress, her body slack with fatigue, though her face softened in relief at last. Ethan stayed close, eyes never leaving her, while Jonah rummaged through jars and pouches, pulling out herbs, strong liquor for cleansing, and clean cloth. That shoulder needs proper tending, Walker, Jonah muttered as he rewrapped the wound with careful hands. And the girl, she'll need days of rest. I'll see to food and water. Hardly anyone knows this place. They won't find you easily. Ethan clasped Jonah's arm, gratitude burning in his eyes. You've saved us again. Jonah gave a short, gruff laugh. We once split a crust of bread under cannon fire. Why not share a roof and a fire now? The night deepened. Amara stirred, blinking open her eyes to see Ethan beside her. His large, scarred hand enfolded hers, thumb tracing lightly over her knuckles. You haven't slept? She whispered, her voice still weak. He shook his head, the firelight glinting in his gray eyes. I just need to know you're here, breathing steady. If you left me, I wouldn't know what I had left. Her eyes filled with tears. She gripped his hand tighter. I told you, Ethan. I chose you. Wherever we go, I won't leave your side. He bent forward until his forehead touched hers, their breaths mingling in the quiet. No words were needed. Closeness carried all that could not be spoken. After all this, Amara whispered, do you ever dream of a real home for us? Ethan closed his eyes, as if daring to picture it. A small wooden cabin by a stream, children running barefoot in the yard, you smiling every morning when you open the door, and me, believing I deserve it. Then promise me, we'll live to see that day. No one will take it away. Ethan drew her into his chest, his embrace, fierce, as though shielding her from the whole world. Outside, the wind howled through the canyon, but within the adobe walls, there was only the rhythm of two hearts beating together, a silent vow for a future, uncertain, yet filled with hope. That evening, the sky spread wide in shades of honeyed gold, spilling across the prairie like liquid fire. Wind swept through the cottonwoods, carrying the scent of wild grass and the cool breath of a nearby stream. In the quiet valley, where they had hidden for days, Ethan stood watching Amara prepare for something neither of them had ever dared believe could come so soon, a wedding. There was no grand chapel, no gathering of townsfolk. Only a wandering preacher Jonah Reed had stumbled across on a hunting trail. The old man carried a weathered Bible, his beard silvered, his eyes kind. After hearing Jonah recount their journey, he nodded without hesitation to stand witness to their love. Amara wore the plainest dress she owned, a cream-colored garment her mother had sewn years before for church. It was faded at the hem, fraying at the sleeves. But when she stepped from the adobe shelter, Ethan forgot to breathe. She was the most beautiful bride he had ever seen, not because of the dress, but because her eyes shone with faith and love. Ethan approached slowly, holding a strip of blue ribbon Amara once tied in her hair while working at the inn. His hand brushed back her dark curls, and he murmured, I have no ring. Will you let me use this instead? Amara nodded, eyes blurred with tears. Ethan tied the ribbon gently in her hair, as though he were setting a treasure in place. Against the dark waves, the blue shimmered like a new promise. Beneath the cottonwood, the preacher lifted his voice, deep and steady. In the eyes of God, and under this moon, we witness a man and woman join their lives not for wealth nor title, but for love and loyalty. Ethan and Amara clasped hands. His palm was broad and scarred, yet when it closed around hers, it became the safest place she had ever known. She trembled, but she did not pull away. She looked into his gray eyes and saw the future she had once thought could never be hers. Ethan Walker, the preacher, continued, do you vow to love, to protect, and to walk beside Amara Johnson, in riches or in want, in health or in sickness, until the very end? Ethan swallowed, voice rough but firm. I vow it, with this life, and beyond it. And you, Amara Johnson, do you vow to love, to honor, and to walk beside Ethan Walker through storm or stillness, until the very end? Amara smiled through her tears. I vow it. No one will part us. The preacher closed his eyes, laying a hand on the worn Bible. Then by the grace of God, I declare you husband and wife. Let this vow live in your hearts, unbroken. Ethan leaned down. Their kiss was no longer tentative like the first, nor blazing like that fateful night, but deep and steady, a vow made flesh. Moonlight poured over them, wrapping the valley in a holy hush, as though creation itself bore witness. From a distance, Jonah allowed himself a rare smile. The preacher shut his Bible and bowed his head. For that moment, there was no bitter creek, no Jacob, no heavy past, only two wounded souls who had found each other. As they stepped back, Amara whispered, her voice soft with wonder, I never believed I could be this happy. Ethan drew her close, his voice low and sure. You are the only reason I still believe in tomorrow. The full moon gleamed on the stream below, reflecting their entwined shadows, proof enough of a covenant that needed no papers, no rings, only love stronger than any chain that had ever bound them. That night, Amara lay with her head on her husband's chest. listening to the steady beat of his heart. And she knew, no matter what storms lay ahead, she had found her true home, a place where her heart was chosen and loved in return. Years later, California bore little resemblance to the harsh frontier they once fled. Rolling prairies stretched wide, vineyards heavy with fruit covered the hills, and dirt trails had become roads for wagons brimming with trade. On the outskirts of Sacramento, a small white-painted farmhouse stood proud among green orchards. This was where Amara and Ethan had planted both their love and their lives. From the porch came the sound of children's laughter. Their grandchildren raced along the fence, cheeks flushed, eyes bright beneath the evening sunday. Amara's eldest daughter brought out a tray of biscuits, smiling. "Mama, sit down. Let us take care of things." Amara returned the smile, her hands trembling but her gaze warm and steady. Her hair, once dark, was now silvered, yet her eyes still carried the same light, the light of a woman who had lived fully and loved completely. Inside the sitting room, a faded photograph hung neatly on the wall. Ethan and Amara, beneath a cottonwood tree, on the day of their wedding. Though blurred with age, anyone could see the love shining in their eyes. Their children and grandchildren had been raised in the shadow of that legacy. Not wealth, not land, but a love forged from courage and faith. One autumn morning, with dew still clinging to the fields, Amara leaned on her cane and walked to the small graveyard at the far end of the orchard. There, among wild flowers of purple and gold, stood a simple headstone, engraved, "Ethan Walker, beloved husband, father, grandfather." Amara stood in silence, the breeze stirring the faded blue ribbon that lay across the stone. She reached out with a trembling hand, tracing the carved name, her eyes blurred with tears. "Can I hold you?" she whispered, her voice rasped by age but rich with the love of a lifetime. And in the hush, it was as though a familiar voice rose out of memory, carried from her heart itself. "Always, my love." Amara closed her eyes. Tears fell, yet her lips curved into a smile. She felt again the calloused hand that once held hers, the strong arms that had always sheltered her. Every journey, every scar, every joy now stood distilled into one bequest, a love strong enough to endure even death. If you are still watching now, surely your heart carries its own memories, an eye that once held you, a hand you once clung to, or a promise that once stirred your soul. Share those moments below, so together we may keep alive the flame of love and fidelity. If this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and share, so that others, especially those who have walked through many autumns, may find a little peace and hope. For there are whispers, once spoken, that never fade. Always, my love.